we got Mike Grundy and Lando Vannata. That's going to be pretty much what ends off the prelims. They've restructured the cards a little bit. Ronaldo Souza and Andre Muniz could end up being that last fight as well. But I'm really excited for this one. I think that Mike Grundy's coming from, not only a great camp, but in his 2 fights to the UFC, he's been able to experience quite a bit. We talk about guys who take on really tough competition. Grundy's fight against Movsar Evloev. I think Movsar Evloev, in the time that I've spent covering fights this much, he's become one of my top 5, top 10 favorite fighters across the board, just because he's so unnoticed for how good he is. And I think that he's getting the right fights now to kind of showcase his skill. He's moving up those rankings quite a bit. But Grundy, man, opened up his UFC career nicely with that big knockout, right? Comes in as a big BJJ guy. I think we've seen what he can do from a durability and cardio standpoint. That's what I loved about that Evloev fight. I think that he never gave up. He kept pushing forward. And I think he's one of those guys where when you look at how much fun he's having in there, it makes it a fun fight. When you talk about the Nad Narimani fight, you probably thought he was going to submit the guy, but, he was just at will, striking with him on the feet, having no issues, was able to use heavy movement and footwork to get out of the way of, Narimani's punches and was landing big on his own, even before he got the finish. Narimani looked beat up. And I think that's where, if you're a BJJ fighter going in there, coming out of Team Calbon with guys like Darren Till and Tom Aspinall, those guys are beastly when it comes to the striking game, and they like to keep the fight standing, but have good submission skill when they have to smell it out. And it looks like Grundy has that skill at the UFC level against certain fighters. Now, when you look at, an Evloev fighter, I think that's top 10, top 5 quality over the next year or two. So, I think he showcased enough there that his striking needs to get better. He needs to be able to deal with that kind of skill. But at the same time, man, Lando Vannata, we know that from a defensive grappling and wrestling skill, he's got it all. But Bobby Green, right? That was a fight where he kind of met his match in terms of the lean in, quick punches. And Bobby Green's a great, sprawler. He's a great roller. He's really good at dealing with those quick little, moments where you have to kind of use the grappling to get out of tough situations. And I think Lando Vannata had that experience a couple times in their fights. So in those areas, Grundy's going to be really good. Now, that's where I think Vannata has to use his kicks, keep him at the distance. I think that Vannata's timing, when he's watching guys circle the octagon, he's always looking for those big spinning power shots to be able to get guys out of there. So there's areas for Vannata to be able to win this fight. I think that we've seen him in the past just take a lot of damage. You talk about some of the leg kick damage that he's taken in previous fights. Those are the areas where if you want to neutralize him, chopping away at him, it seems to do really, really well for fighters. But I think that Grundy has a pretty good game plan here. But if he's not able to kind of get in close and use some boxing and get the fight to the ground, maybe use some ground and pound to tire up Vannata. The thing about Vannata is he takes damage a lot. He keeps his hands low, but that's his style of striking. And I think that he lands well. That's the big part of his game. And I think Grundy's going to take some damage in this fight without question. But in terms of areas to win, it's hard not to shape up and see that Grundy has some opportunities here to, chop up the legs, hit the body a bit, use some of those, good lean-ins to change levels. And when the opportunity comes, hopefully you can tire Vannata out and get the fight to the ground. But on the flip side for Vannata, I'm really liking this idea of, using the footwork, keeping yourself moving, laterally and avoiding the big leg kicks, not taking too much damage and being able to maybe even do some chopping of your own to keep him from coming in forward so much. And, big head kicks, they're going to be coming. If Grundy's not careful, they could land big. You look at some of the guys that Vannata's already fight, Tony Ferguson, David Tamor, Dragar Klose, like these are massive names in the UFC. And, the Diakiese fight is the one we're kind of referring to with the leg kicks. I think that was one where if you're going to take a game plan for someone, especially now with Vannata, I think that's a great one. But like I said, I think that we know who the striker is, we know who the grappler is, but we've seen both guys do both pretty well against certain level competition. So you just have to see if these guys are at that level now against each other. And so for me, it's a really tough fight to call, man. I'm leaning Grundy just a bit because I think he's on the come up, but Vannata's just always been such a gamer, man. And when you look at the loss and the types of guys he loses to, Bobby Green, man, he's just a weird part-time superstar, right? He shows up so well in some fights against the toughest guys, but he can never really get the wins that traject him into that top 10, top 15 area where you can start seeing some of the bigger names to fight. But in this case, let's look at the lines. I think that it's going to be interesting if it's not Grundy being the favorite. I would have to assume he is, but Yeah. So, I mean, he opened as a -171. I do think that's a bit high just because there's not much body of work to go with for Grundy. I think that he's proven himself quite a bit when it comes to just, his limited UFC record and some of the things he's done on the regional scene. But, it's really tough to go against a guy like Vannata, who's just been such a proven guy in the octagon. And I think the chess match with Medeiros was a great example of where he was able to showcase what he can do over 3 rounds if he play into his hands and really force that striking battle for 3 rounds. I think that his gas tank's there. And I think that if he doesn't take much damage, he's able to kind of do a lot of his own. And that's where Grundy needs to be careful. Use the leg kicks, chop him up, and make sure that you're not taking those blows because they add up. And by the 3rd round, Vannata can look really, really good with some of the accuracy that he throws these strikes with. So, very, very unsurprisingly, the line moves now to a -125 for Grundy to a -105 for Vannata. In MMA world, to me, that's basically a pick 'em. I would say anything under -130 to me is pretty close because it seems like even for Vegas, they don't really give a guy that +100 or higher in terms of dog if it doesn't surpass that area. So, I mean, very close fight, tough to call. If you're able to pick this fight, the last fight, and if you're able to pick the last 3 fights, doesn't matter who you are, luck or not, that's a great feat. So make sure to announce that, maybe throw it in the comments or something. I'd love to know. But